Well, a very warm welcome, everyone, to this NICEC seminar on a career change model in practice. I'm Rosemary McLean. I'm one of the NICEC Fellows, so there's quite a lot of us here who are NICEC Fellows as well as members. And I'm curious if this, for some of you, this might be your first time of taking part in a NICEC Fellow session. So if that is the case, let us know. Perhaps put a thumbs up or say in the chat. So very warm welcome if it's your first time. If you can mute yourself when you're not talking, that would be helpful, just to minimize the background. We will make this session quite interactive, so there will be lots of opportunities for discussion. And do feel free to put your cameras on, because it's always nice to see people who are here. So those of you who don't know too much about NICEC, is really quite a unique group of people involved in NICEC. We're very eclectic in our interest in careers. And I guess what's unique about it is that we have people focused on policy in careers work. We have people who work in perhaps research or in academic environments who are thought leaders in that area. We have people who are teaching others to become career practitioners or careers leaders in schools, things like that. And we also have practitioners working in careers, and that's very much my bag. I work in organizational settings with businesses looking at career development approaches. And today's session, I think, is very much about practice. It's going to be, and I know a lot of you who've signed up for this are in the field of practice, doing careers work in practice. So that's really exciting to see you here. So I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion. And the topic is, around career change. And I think what you're going to hear from Richard Alderson from Careershifters is the really impressive piece of work about, how Richard and his organization have been able to reach out to individuals across the world who are stuck in their career. And I think those of us who work with people, adults in the workplace, know how challenging that can be when people feel stuck in their careers and what it takes to help people shift and move and the complexity of it. So I think it's going to be really exciting to hear about, the way Richard and his organization have approached it. So really, really looking forward to that. So what I'm going to do now, though, is pass to John, who's going to kindly, one of the other NICEC Fellows, introduce Richard and set the scene a little bit more, and then we'll move into the input from Richard. We're going to have breakouts, we're going to have plenary, and I'm just going to loosely chair the whole thing, so you'll hear from me again shortly as well. So John, over to you.
Thanks, Rosemary. So I'm John Lee. It's my great pleasure to just introduce Richard. I first met Richard Alderson, I think, at an exhibition in London about 15 years ago. I think we had a 5-minute conversation. But in early 2019, a mutual friend suggested that there's a big overlap between my work and Richard's work with Careershifters. So we had lunch and we compared notes, and I have to say that I got really interested in some of the big ideas underlying the 2 major programs that Richard leads and is involved in. First is the Launch Pad, which I know Richard is going to be talking about in a few moments. And the second area of work, which overlaps with something else I do, is the Firework training course for career coaches, which he also leads and manages. So I have to declare an interest, which is why I'm not chairing this event. I'm involved in delivering both of these programs. Nevertheless, I had no hesitation at all in suggesting that NICEC members and guests might find it really interesting to hear from Richard about his work and the models and ideas that underpin it. So let me introduce him properly. Richard Alderson is the founder of Careershifters, which helps lively, motivated people who want or need to make a career change to find fulfilling work. Since 2006, it's reached over 8 million people and served about over 15,000 customers in over 60 countries. And his background includes co-founding 2 award-winning social enterprises in India, working as a technology consultant in the corporate world, and a short spell as a monk's assistant. So a warm NICEC welcome to you, Richard, and over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Rosemary, for hosting me and for inviting me to speak. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm really curious to hear from all of you a little bit later on in this session about your thoughts on what we're doing, because this is something that's very close to my heart, and I'm always really excited to learn from others in this space. So let me share my screen. I'm going to keep my slides deliberately on preview mode. So I will be jumping around in them just to make this as interactive as possible. And this is what I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to share a little bit about Career Shifters. John's given a fantastic introduction. I'm going to share my story because really my story is critical to understanding why we set up Career Shifters in the way we have.
Hello.
And the way that we do the work that we do.
I was just messaging you, but here you are. Well, yeah. Don't get them when I'm in the car. So sorry.
So you're on mute, everybody.
I'll then go into talking a little bit more about the Launch Pad, which is one of our primary courses, which applies a lot of the principles that I learned, but also my team learned in our career change journeys. And then, of course, we'll have time for Q&A and breakout rooms and all kinds of other things, which will be really fun. So, as John said, Career Shifters is an organization that specializes in helping people who want or need to make a career change mid-career, do that in the most effective way, and ultimately find and move into more fulfilling work. And we do this through a range of different offerings. So we have a very large free content section that we offer out to the world through our website. We also run workshops, we run courses, and we do one-on-one coaching. We are a team of people. This is a slightly old team photograph, but we are a team of people that are spread around the world, but also who have all made their own career changes. And so know what it's like to be in the situation that so many of our clients are facing. And as John said, we've, over the years, since 2006, when we launched, reached 8 million people in more than 190 countries, built a community of people who are interested in or wanting to make a career change of more than 180,000 people, and work directly with 15,000 clients. And we've been featured also in the media across the world on this topic. What drives us as an organization is really the difference that we've seen doing work that fits in our own lives and wanting that for other people. Now, this may sound a little bit grandiose to say you can change the world if you just change what you do, but we have genuinely seen that not only do people who make career changes into more fulfilling work for them, not only do they feel better themselves, not only does it have a positive impact on their mental and physical health, but it also impacts the people around them. And in the best scenarios, can also make a much bigger impact in the wider world. And that's what really drives us as an organization. What I should say too is that we are not prescriptive about what that career change looks like. So it could be a very small shift, it could be a very large shift. And there are multiple shifts that sit on a spectrum of different career changes that our clients make. What's really important to us is that they find more fulfillment in their work. We are a certified B Corporation, which means that we meet very strict social and environmental standards in our work. And we are part of a movement, a growing movement across the world of businesses focused for good. So let me share a little bit about my story, because really this is going to give some context, as I said, to our approach, but also why the idea and how the idea came up for Career Shifters. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while I share this. So my story really started when I was sat in a cubicle wearing a grey suit on a grey day, sometime in February, in an office on the banks of the Thames in London. I was working for a large technology company you all would have heard of, and on paper and to people outside of me, my career was going great. I'd been there a couple of years. I was advancing. I was working in different countries around the world, but inside I was getting increasingly miserable. Why? Because a few things. I couldn't really see a future for myself at that company longer term. I looked at my boss, my boss's boss, their boss, and I thought, do I really want their roles? Nope. I noticed myself not feeling excited about talking about my work. So when I went to parties and people used to ask me, well, what do you do, Richard, for work? I used to try and change the subject as quickly as possible because I just didn't enjoy talking about it. And also I felt this greater and greater sense of dread about the possibility of, if I wasn't to change course, to getting to the end of my life, looking back on my working life and thinking that I might not be proud of what I'd done in the world of work. So all of these things were gnawing at me. And what I noticed was that while there was a strong desire or a strong level of unhappiness, there was an increasing desire to change for me. There were also two big obstacles that came up for me. One was I had no idea about what else I could do or wanted to do. And secondly, I felt a huge amount of fear about stepping off the ladder that I'd been climbing and stepping out into the unknown, potentially taking a salary cut, potentially starting from the bottom. And both of those things left me in a somewhat paralyzed state. And to cut a very long story short, I spent probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years in this state, not really having enough commitment or clarity about where I was going to make a change, but getting increasingly stuck or feeling increasingly disillusioned, feeling increasingly stuck and increasingly unhappy. I tried a number of different things that didn't work. I'll come onto those a little bit later in terms of trying to get that clarity about what else I could do and then trying to get the confidence to overcome my fears. But ultimately, those initial things didn't work. But then when I started to do some different things, I eventually, through a lot of trial and error, found my way into a different career, one that was radically different. So rather than working for a company of 250,000 people, I ended up working for a company of 60 people. It was in the social impact sector rather than the corporate sector. It was doing work that I hadn't even heard of when I was sitting at my desk. And most importantly for me, it brought me a level of fulfillment about my work that I'd never had before. I used to go to work in the mornings, get there first because I love my job so much. I remember looking at the people around me and thinking, wow, these are my kinds of people. I feel the first time that I sort of values aligned with the people that I was working with, and things went just felt a lot smoother than they had done before. So that was, in a nutshell, that was my first career change. About 3 years later, I made another career change into entrepreneurship, and I started to set up some different companies and social enterprises in India and the UK. And what happened during that initial first shift was that I reflected on my own journey. I reflected on how much of an impact that career change had had on me positively. It fundamentally changed my general level of happiness. It fundamentally changed my well-being. I was really quite miserable and quite an unhappy person with some, you might say, some mental health challenges around that. And it also gave me a different perspective on the world of work and what was possible for me, which gave me greater confidence to then make that second shift. What I also noticed was that there were a lot of people around me in my age group. At that time, I was in my early 30s, that were facing similar challenges, that were saying to me, Richard, I also feel miserable. I also don't know what else I want to do. I also feel a lot of fear about stepping out into something different. And so what started to emerge for me was a sense of, well, how might I be able to help, or how might we be able to help these types of people like me? And what I so craved at the time that I was going through a career change was something that I couldn't find, which was something online that was in one place, a resource that had practical guidance for how to go about this, because it wasn't obvious, inspiring stories of people who'd done it that I could learn from, but also get inspired by, and a way to connect me with people that could help me, subject matter experts, but also a community of other people in the same situation. And I was working in technology, I was working on web-based stuff, and nothing like that existed at the time. And so that's really where the idea for Career Shifters came from, was can we create this? And with a founding team, I did start to work on this in the mid-2000s, and then we launched something in 2006 that has then evolved over many, many years into what we do now. So that's really my story and where the idea for Career Shifters came from. And let me come back now to the presentation, because I want to share some of the lessons that I learned. And I should say too that my founding team learned. So Career Shifters, while I initiated it, has very much been a team effort over many years. We have always been learning. We continue to learn to this day about what really works in this space. But what my team and I learned reasonably early on were a few things about career change. And I'm curious to know the degree to which these resonate or don't with you, because some of these are a little bit, well, they're challenging to some of the things that certainly was around as common wisdom around careers when I was in this situation. So these have shaped some foundational beliefs for us as an organization. So the first belief is this: the first thing someone who's stuck in their career change needs to change isn't their career. This is phrased in a deliberately provocative way. But what I noticed was when I was in my situation, and in fact, when I came out of it later on, and when we look at all the clients that we work with, if someone is stuck in their career change, we believe and we've seen that the most effective thing that they can start to work on is their mindset. And specifically, the degree of and level of agency and adaptability that they have, that's going to enable them to take the right steps to move through the situation they're in to a place of greater clarity and confidence. The second thing that I noticed was that for me and for many other people, career change did not happen in a coaching session. Did I employ some coaches when I was looking for what else I wanted to do? Yes, I did. Were they beneficial to some extent? Yes, they were. But did they ultimately help me make the career change? No. Same went for books. I read every single book I could get my hands on the topic of career change. Did they provide some useful inputs? Yes. Did they ultimately help me make the career change? No. Ditto psychometric tests. What we've seen ultimately is that the biggest and most important thing that someone in a career change situation needs to do is to learn to take action. And that means to interact with the outside world. And that's ultimately how they're going to make their shift finally, because every job, every line of work, whether it's working for someone else or starting your own company, is going to involve interacting with other people, is going to involve ultimately securing work from a company or securing work from clients. But even before that, we found that an action-based approach is really, really powerful to complement, but ultimately to move people forward in the most effective way. And the final thing that we observed was that career change is fundamentally a process of innovation. So if someone is, as I was, not clear about what they want to do next and stuck as a result, they need to go through a process of innovation. And innovation involves a few things that are quite counterintuitive to many of us. It involves getting outside of what we know currently. We had a neuroscientist come and speak on one of our masterclasses recently to our audience. And she said this, really interestingly. She said, the human brain cannot ideate from anything other than what it has experienced. And so if you are going to innovate, if you're going to come up with ideas for your career change when you are stuck, you've got to do different things. You've got to have different inputs that are going to yield you different ideas going forward. Secondly, innovation is fundamentally messy. It involves dead ends. It involves failures in inverted commas. And going through a career change necessarily involves these things. So these were the three things that we learned and started to become foundational beliefs for everything that we do in the way that we work with our clients. And these have then informed what we call our career change success principles, which are the three mantras, if you like, that we continually repeat and work with our audience on, because we've seen that these are the most effective ones to help them move forward in the most effective way. The first is this: don't do this alone, do it with others. If you are going through a process of innovation, one of the most effective things that you can do is surround yourself with other people who can challenge your ideas, who can offer you different inspiration, who can open up networks that you might not otherwise have had. The second reason is that career change takes time. If someone asks me, how long does a career change take? I'm going to say to them, look, you've got to budget at least 6 months and maybe multiple years to go through a career change. You need to sustain yourself over that period. You need to maintain commitment and motivation. And one of the best ways that we've seen to do that is by having other people around you. So this is why we say to our clients, don't do it alone. Second principle, don't figure it out, act it out. As I said to you previously, I read every book I could get my hands on. I made lots of lists. I did lots of psychometric tests. Ultimately, they didn't give me the clarity or the answers that I wanted. What did ultimately help me move forward to get clarity about things I didn't necessarily even know about at the time was action. And action means meeting new people, having new experiences, stepping out of your current environment. Essentially, getting outside of my reality bubble was what really accelerated my shift. And action is the most useful, most impactful way of doing that we've seen. And as Seth Godin talks about here, again, speaks to the principles of innovation. When you collide with different universes, you are going to generate new ideas, which is what so many of our audience are really craving. Third principle, don't look for jobs, look for people. The traditional job market is not set up to help career changers. We affectionately call people CVs who want to change careers into a different line of work a list of things you don't want to do anymore. And so it's not necessarily a useful tool to lead with in terms of marketing yourself. Having said that, it is a tool that needs to be dealt with and updated at the right point, but often people start there rather than doing it later on when they've got greater clarity. And ultimately, when you look for people, you're going to learn more about what other people do in other fields. You're also going to be able to present yourself in a way you can't do on paper, and you're going to, through doing so, opening up opportunities, because every opportunity, as Ben Kazmoka says here, is ultimately connected to a person. So why did we develop the Launchpad? We didn't develop the Launchpad when we launched. We developed the Launchpad several years after we launched, in fact, about 7 years after we launched, because we started working with people in workshops. And what we noticed was people said to us, we really want some ongoing support. We really value being amongst other people as we do this. How is it that you might be able to help us? And so based on the requests from our audience, based on what we learned and ultimately what we really had wanted in our career change, we developed this course that brought together all the principles that I've been sharing. And if there are some principles that underpin the Launchpad, then they're really these. And they're a little bit counter, or they're complementary, or they build on what I saw was the more traditional approach at the time that I was going through my own career change journey. So rather than going to an individual career coach, getting a set of exercises to do, so a primarily reflective-based learning approach, working with one single subject matter expert, working alone, with a focus on getting clearer about what my next options could be, the Launchpad goes further. So it's led with an action-based learning approach. So from day one of the course, people are in action in the outside world, learning through doing. And it also incorporates reflective learning. We have a faculty that takes people through, that involves different subject matter experts, coaches, mentors, trainers. It's done in community. So we take cohorts through the course, and we have a very strong focus on mindset and helping people build the muscles that they need, not just to make their upcoming shift, but also future shifts. Because we believe if we can give people or enable people to develop the mindset that is going to help them with future shifts, then we're going to be leveraging the time in the best possible way in their course with us. And so the Career Change Launch Pad we launched this in 2013, 10 years ago. It's an 8-week group-based experience designed to help participants find direction and build confidence for their career change and future shifts. We are very clear from the outset that it's not something that is designed to help people make a career change within the 8-week period. As I've said, we believe, and we've seen that career change takes a lot longer. And participants have a structured set of activities to follow every single week. They come onto group-based calls every single week. We also have the option of one-on-one coaching over and above those. We have wonderful trainers that come in and work with our group, including John. And we provide our group with a lot of different tools, cheat sheets, scripts to help them save time and to build on the learnings of previous participants. And we take people through, over the 8 weeks, a 3-stage process, which is taking them on a journey from lower levels of clarity and confidence to higher levels of clarity and confidence. And also on a journey of the number of possibilities that they're looking at. Weeks 1 to 4 is what's called the discovering phase, where simultaneously they're discovering more about the outside world, getting outside of their reality bubble in a way that yields them new insights about different roles, different fields, different ways of working, and simultaneously discovering more about themselves and what really makes them tick and what's really important. In week 5, they bring all this together into what we call career themes, which are thematic areas of interest for them to explore. And in weeks 6 to 8, they go into what we call testing and validating, where they start to test their ideas. And the aim of this phase is for them to test their very first idea in the real world. As I said, we have a faculty of Launchpad leaders. Please have some sympathy for John for having to work with all these women. We have a very female-heavy team. We have taken more than 2,000 participants through this course from more than 35 countries around the world, and from a variety of different backgrounds and situations. So primarily private sector, but also a big chunk of public sector people, primarily employed, but also a number of self-employed, people not currently employed and on sabbatical, and then a vast range of ages from 23 to 63, but really with the sweet spot between, for people in their 30s to their 50s. And this is what we've learned from participants about some of the outcomes for them. So on finishing the course, we do a Net Promoter Score, and our average Net Promoter Score is 70. And 6 months after the course, we know that on average, 80% of participants are making positive progress in their shifts, as reported by themselves, and 32% of participants have made a successful shift. Getting data beyond that 6-month period has been very tricky for us. Putting out some examples of people's shifts. I just want to point out some of the things that they're saying that come back to some of the reasons that we have designed the course in the way that we've designed it. So Rosanna here, who shifted from being an engineer to working for a startup in the education space, said the Launchpad shifted my mindset. Ned, who went from digital marketing to social enterprise, said that he was really he got so much about learning about an alternative process for finding work that didn't involve conventional job applications. Julie, who shifted from being in academia to training. That again talked about the change of perspective she experienced. And really importantly, Matt here, who shifted from advertising to being a freelancer, talked about what's so important in the course too, that we try to make this fun, try to make this an experience that brings some lightness to what can feel like a very heavy process. And we're still learning in so many different ways. As John knows, because John takes part in our debriefs after every course, we are always trying to make the course better. We're always learning what works for people. We are not there yet. I'll just mention 3 areas that I think are continual challenges for us as an organization with this course. Is first of all, how do we optimize the time? 8 weeks is actually a very short period of time in what is a longer journey. How do we make the most of that to get the benefits that we want? Secondly, how can we continue to learn how to cater for diverse personality types, learning styles? And thirdly, how can we maximize the ongoing benefits of this course for people who've taken part? So we are continually curious and continually learning on all those topics. So I'm going to pause there, and I hope that's been useful to go through. And I think I'm going to hand over back to you, Rosemary.
Thanks very much, Richard. Well, just firstly to congratulate you really on it sounds like it's been your life's work over the last few years, and actually to build something like that from the kernel of your original idea and to bring it to fruition on a global scale is really impressive. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And what I was also thinking about was it actually mirrors something very similar to what my organization does in a program called Be Bold in Your Career, which is very similar in some ways. And it just made me think that role of relationships that you were talking about, that having the right people to connect with, and just that centrality of that being a very pivotal part. But anyway, it's enough from me. I think what we've got an opportunity to do now is for people in the audience to pick up on some of the themes and what it's made you think about in your own practice or your own research. And what questions you might have to learn more about from Richard. So would anyone like to kick us off? And if you don't kick us off, I might pick on someone. And it was one particular person I'm thinking I might pick on to come into the conversation. But has anyone got something they'd like to bring to the right? Janet, thanks. You.
Hello, Rosemary. Hi, that was really interesting, Richard. And I think was struck by many thoughts as I was listening in. And then the sentence that you said about the last thing people need to change is their careers. So I would just be interested to know what else. What else might people be changing? I was just kind of interested to hear a bit more about that.
Are you referring to? Just come back to the slides.
It was Richard when you used that phrase about where you start. Don't think about changing your career, change your mindset.
Yeah. So
what else do you need to change?
So let me just. I think this is a slide, right? So. First thing someone who's stuck in their career change needs to change isn't their career. So what I noticed from my own career change was that once I'd done it once, I felt a lot more confident about doing it the second time. And I felt more confident because I, through trial and error, worked out that I needed to take a very proactive approach to figuring out what next. I needed to learn through doing. I needed to know that the actions I was taking, I didn't know where they were going to lead, and so I was going to have to take those actions nonetheless. I learned that I had to sometimes go down some dead ends. I learned that I needed to have multiple conversations with multiple people. I learned that I needed to be somewhat bold, coming back to what you were talking about, Rosemary, just now. There was a boldness I needed to adopt in some of the ways I went about in the world that were going to help bring opportunities and insights to me. All of that I didn't know, I didn't understand. It wasn't a mindset that I'd had in my first career change. When I came to my second career change, I felt a heck of a lot more confident because through doing the first career change and understanding and reflecting on it and learning the mindsets, then I felt a lot more confident. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a mindset shift. That's going to be one of the highest leverage things that I believe that we can bring our clients, is that's going to help them in their upcoming shift, but also in future shifts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So you're saying it's something about your mindset in this instance, or a client's
yes.
mindset. So the mindset might be about the way of approaching career change, or it could be about themselves. Is that what we're saying? Or it could be about something other.
I think it's fundamentally how to navigate uncertainty.
Okay.
So the reasons, like our primary audience are people who come to us and say, I'm stuck. I'm in a career, I'm not happy. There's a level of pain here that's making me want to do something about it, but I don't know what else I want to do, and I feel a huge amount of fear. My proposition is if these people had the mindset that I was just talking about, they might not even come to us, and they might be able to just navigate that level of uncertainty and that level of fear in a much more effective way. I don't think it's something that we're taught at school to do effectively. I would like to see it taught in schools, but I think it's something that we spend quite a lot of time doing with our clients, because we've seen that it's the highest leverage to help them make the most successful shift.
So it's something about understanding ways in which to transition, which we wouldn't have been taught somewhere else, perhaps. Or
it's not just about knowledge. It's about ways of being. It's about showing up with a level of curiosity, showing up with a level of willingness to take actions without knowing where they're going, an openness to things that they didn't even know existed previously, a level of boldness that they can take into the world. These are the qualities, the mindset qualities that we found to be most effective for people going through a career transition.
Okay, well, that's really helpful. Thank you. I can see a row of people with their hands up. So
I need to think how to manage this, because there's probably some people wanting to build on what you were just saying, but there's probably some other questions as well. So is there someone whose hands up has got a follow-up question to what we've been talking about, want to go next? And then we'll come back to Jill, I think Rachel and Christine, and then Laura. Does anyone want to, if you put your finger up, if your question is building on what's just been discussed? Christine, right, you come in next then.
Hi, it was only a small point. I was thinking about Richard's description of people thinking differently, and this concept of exercising the muscle in your brain. You know, if you think of how you think, if you think about how one approaches things normally, then you are almost having to retrain the muscle in your brain by going through some of the things that Richard is suggesting. That, you know, it's cognitive to some extent, but it is actually retraining the brain to think differently about how you're going to approach it. If you're following something helpful like the framework that Richard's got, which feels very safe and containing, but nonetheless you're being invited to challenge that rather other aspect of the muscle in your brain, that you view the brain as a muscle that could work differently for you. I haven't put that very well, but that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, really good point, Christine. I guess the drawing on neuroscience is building, validity to that as well, isn't it? That we know more and more about the way the brain works. So, let's move on, because there's lots of hands. I think Jill, you were next up, and then I think Rachel, and then Laura, then Lynn. And I think maybe introduce yourself when if there's time, just briefly, or before you speak, might be helpful for everyone.
Sure. Hi, thanks, Rosemary, and hi, Richard, and thank you. I'm Jill Fajero. I'm one of the NICEC Fellows, also currently the chair of NICEC. So it was really interesting to hear what you had to say, and I was really struck when you talked about the received wisdom of how to do a career change, and how those were the things that you tried first and they didn't work. And you said that you'd had coaching and it was helpful, but ultimately it wasn't what made the difference, and reading books and psychometrics and so forth. So it's a bit, I just wanted to sort of dig into that really a little bit and say, so tell us more about that received wisdom, what it is. Let's examine that. And what did the coaching do if it was helpful? Do you see where I'm sort of trying to go?
Yeah, totally. I think all these things were, for me, and again, I'm speaking for personal experience here, but were pieces in a bigger puzzle. And so I think so let me tackle you've got two questions: received wisdom and impact on coaching on me. So received wisdom, and we still have members of our audience coming to us with this. So you want to make a career change, you need to update your CV.
Yeah, okay.
We don't think that's helpful at the beginning of a career change. You want to change careers, you've got to identify your transferable skills. Again, we don't think that's necessarily helpful, because it's much more important to know where you want to be headed, and then to identify what skills you have that might be transferable into that particular area, as well as skills you might want to build to go into that area. And so I think there's a lot of common wisdom, and I'm not sure where it comes from, that isn't particularly helpful, and that keeps people stuck unnecessarily.
I think if I could come.
Sorry.
No, Karen, you make another point, Richard. Sorry to interrupt.
And then just to come to the second answer, the second question. So I think the impact of coaching on me was the first time I'd had coaching, and so I think it brought me a level of awareness around coaching as a discipline, but also helped me become slightly more self-aware myself. And I think that is a very useful. That was a useful outcome for me. It didn't give me clarity about specific career directions, but it did help me become more self-aware in that process. And by the way, I think however people go through a career transition, if they have their eyes open going through it, it's a phenomenal opportunity for greater self-awareness, because it's essentially an existential opening that's going to provoke some very profound questions, and a coach can help that kind of process, and certainly did for me at that stage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I was just going to mention the work of Herminia Ibarra. Some of you know her work, because I think she is very aligned with what you're saying, Richard, about
yes.
Do the introspection, don't work out everything you want, go out and act and deliver and experiment and find, and by doing, I think. So it's quite similar.
Correct. Yeah.
Let's go to Rachel. Rachel Mallers. So Rachel, if you could just briefly introduce yourself as well.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Based in Northamptonshire. I work a lot with adults and also in schools. So I'm a practitioner and also do career coaching. So I loved it when you said it wasn't helpful, Richard. I thought that was a great, well, I mean, it was helpful, but it, so I think that was good. I really enjoyed listening to your journey and how you went through it. And I was just writing down a few things, which are probably just comments. My reflection is that we are resistant, aren't we, to action? And so we're looking for a mechanism to enable us to act, really, however that may be. And sometimes within the confines of delivery, speaking from personal experience, a contract or a mode of working may not allow that intensity of the relationship to provide that comfort to the person that you're supporting, that they feel confident to move forward, going back to your slide about kind of developing confidence. But that's just an observation. Goodness, so applicable to students, in In schools, we've given up contracts in the past 18 months because schools have told us we've got 15 minutes with each student. And I've had careers advisors of mine say, I prefer to work in Tesco than try to be worried about how I'm not delivering a service. So that would be great. The comment I would appreciate some thoughts on is it so dependent upon the range of opportunities or individuals or the people that you talked about where they can kind of experience this? Because I'm doing some work at the moment that's more sector-based around getting people into food and drink work, and it's having access to those individuals that can kind of expose them to those different examples, roles, and that kind of thing.
Sorry, what was the question?
So is it the access to those people that do have those other experiences or can provide them with something that they can experience themselves or act on, or that's the critical thing? And that may be, do you have lots of people that will do that?
So we teach our clients how to reach out to people in the fields that really interest them. So we don't have a bunch of people sort of on our books essentially.
No.
But we help them navigate to those kinds of people and A, know how best to approach people, B, know best how to have the conversations with them, C, how to follow up, and then leverage those relationships going forward.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. Thank you.
I suppose building on that, what thing can be a challenge that probably people around the table do think about is the sort of difficulty of breaking into networks when you're, if you're from a different socioeconomic group, or, social mobility is an issue for this, sometimes can be. I'm sure people are thinking about that as well as a factor. It's not, it's a challenge, isn't it? How do you break in to build relationships with people when you haven't perhaps got those networks? But that's a whole topic, really, Richard.
Yeah, and I think so. We encourage people to use their existing networks, and I totally hear you, and I totally would agree that different people will have different networks depending on socioeconomic groups. And what we also teach people, and we found this to be incredibly effective, is just how to approach people outside of their networks and their networks and do that really effectively.
Yeah, great to hear. So Laura Walker, would you like to come in now?
Hi everyone, and thank you, Richard, for that. Was really interesting. So just by way of introduction, because we were just nudged to do that, I spend half of my time researching, so midlife career reinvention, and half of my time as a practitioner, so working with L&D organisations in careers or in learning. So I kind of straddle this world. And some of you will know my research into midlife career reinvention, because we've talked about it in this context before, a lot of which resonated with what you said, Richard. So just to reinforce that resonation around start with discovering, don't start with deciding. So don't jump straight to deciding what you want to do. You have to first start with discovering. Also, the importance of contextual readiness around working with other people, working with your social systems, because they can act as gravity for you, keeping you grounded, but also they can keep you stuck if you don't pay attention to what's going on in your life and your family and your world. And then the other finding was that career transitions are a dance with fear and confidence. So as confidence goes up, fear doesn't necessarily go down. So I'm interested in your program about whether you address fears with people. You mentioned the word a few times in your own story, that you experience lots of different types of fear at different times. And that's why it's a dance, because it's not a linear relationship, and different fears can emerge all at once. Sometimes multiple fears can layer on top of each other. So I was wondering if that's something that you have time to get into in your 8-week program. I realize you've said it's hard.
No, so the answer is yes, very much so. And that's why our 8-week program is action-led. So we found the single best way for people to navigate fear not necessarily to overcome it. You're right, it's still going to be there. But to build a muscle that enables them to feel more confident to act in the face of fear is to take action and to build that muscle through action. So there are a whole set of what we call missions that we give people throughout the 8 weeks that are all action orientated, that gently stretch them, gently build, and then allow them to flex that muscle over the 8 weeks in a way that leaves them at the end of the course, we hope, and certainly we've seen from what they've been talking about in their experiences with us, with a greater sense of confidence, a greater sense of agility, agency, and ability to act in the face of fear.
And I guess we need to remember that fear is there to keep us safe, so it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
So it gives us really good clues about what's important. Okay, thank you.
I muted myself. I'm loving the way people are linking what we're talking about to career theory in the chat, because there's clearly, there's a lot of underpinning career theory that I think supports a lot of what you're talking about, Richard, which is great. So thanks to everyone for doing that. I think we might have time for one more question or comment before we go into breakouts. Does anyone have anything you want to add or build on what we've been talked about? Anyone? Great. Well, I mean, I think that has been a really great exchange there, Richard, hasn't it? With the
Jane raised her hand, Rosemary.
Oh, sorry, Jane, missed you there. Jane, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jane Artez. I'm a NICEC Fellow and a previous researcher and practitioner and manager, and basically now mainly retired. I was just wanting to ask you, Richard, whether you thought that your approach applies to other kinds of changes and not just related to work. What you describe sounds a way of moving on in your, I don't know, sporting life or your professional out of work hobby life, or it's more about the entire person, not just about a role or getting a new role, isn't it? Do you feel people move on in their entire lives rather than simply a new job?
100%. So people report to us all kinds of wider benefits of developing greater agency in their lives, being able to more confidently ask for what they want from other people in their relationships. And you're right, this kind of group-based process is not something that is just done in this context. Many of the greatest organizations tackling quite profound transformations in human beings do similar group-based work. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rosemary, you're muted.
And I sort of unmuted. Sorry about that. Keep unmuting myself. So I think now's a good time then, probably, to go into the breakout. So John, do you want to set them up for us in terms of what we're doing?
Well, we're going to give you can obviously talk about whatever you like, and we're going to put you in small groups for about 15 minutes. The questions we're suggesting, which we will try and post into the rooms themselves, 2 questions. What have you heard that you'd like to know more about? So reflect on that with each other. And second question is broader, what challenges and benefits do you see in this kind of online delivery? So enjoy each other's company and conversations, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
I think everyone's back. Yeah, great. Well, I hope you had some good discussions in there. Sorry for the group I was in. I wasn't really supposed to be there, so I just left, as did Richard. Anyway, well, let's pick up the conversation a bit more. Anyone from the groups want to just, is there any other emerging questions that have come up, or challenges that you've identified that you'd like to explore? So anyone want to kick us off with some further or anything you discussed in your group, if it was nothing to do with it. It would be interesting as well. So Siobhan, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're thinking?
Yes, I'm Siobhan Neary. I work at ICEGS at University of Derby, and also a NICEC Fellow. We were in a really interesting group because we had somebody with us who is a career changer. And I suppose one of the things that I wondered about, Richard, in terms of what you were talking about earlier, was that, you know, a lot of the people that I've been in contact with who are in the phase that you're talking about often don't have the bandwidth to do a lot of the things that you're talking about, that to actually be, you have to be in a quite positive place to be in that proactive, because you're talking, or it appears to me, very much about proactivity in terms of moving onwards. But often people are very, very negative about themselves, their confidence, their ability, the opportunities for them, particularly those who are in the 50s. And there's a lot of people, you know, particularly in the 50s, you know, and Laura does a lot of work on this, who just don't have the bandwidth to do it. I just wondered what your thoughts were about the psychological challenges that people might experience.
Great question.
100%. So if you speak to our audience, they will say exactly the same thing. They will say, how on earth can I fit in doing activities over and above a job that drains me, family I have to look after in many cases, and a schedule where I just don't have a lot of time. And when I do have time, I just want to collapse in front of the TV, or just want to not do anything else work related. So we hear that all the time. Secondly, we also hear repeatedly that people's confidence has been drained by doing work that isn't right for them, feeling like there isn't anything else that's going to be possible, going also in a vicious circle of there can't be anything else, I'm stuck here, oh, it's really terrible, and just in that. And so this is why I said that mindset is one of the most important levers, this whole equation. And one of the things that we've seen be most effective to help shift mindsets is action, and secondly is community. And so that's why we encourage our participants to take small actions on a regular basis, so it fits around their day jobs. So for example, with our Launchpad, we say to people, look, if you're going to commit to doing the course, the minimum amount of time that you need to spend is 45 to 60 minutes a day. If you can't dedicate that time, don't take part. It's not going to be worth your while. But if you can, we're going to give you the actions that are going to be most effective to take within that time period. You're not going to necessarily be overwhelmed, because as long as you dedicate that time, you can take those actions, and you're going to, in taking those actions, you're going to start to build confidence. So we believe action precedes confidence rather than confidence precedes action. And then when you're in community with other people and you see other people taking action, that motivates you to take more action. And so it's an upward virtuous circle rather than a negative downward circle that we see so often.
Richard.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of peer support's quite a critical factor, isn't it? Often in any sorts of challenges that people set themselves, that accountability to others helps.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it's a good point. Okay, anyone else got a comment, or maybe one of the challenges or benefits that you identified from this type of approach? Anyone?
Just one of the things I appreciated about the approach was the fact that it is online, actually, because I think a lot of people see that as a bit of a mixed experience. But because we're talking about exposing people to new people and building a new community and new experiences, I guess my assumption, which I'm going to ask you if it's true, is that having that more geographic reach provides more of that exposure and that possibility to different perspectives, to different opportunities, to different ideas than you might do if it was a face-to-face session, for example. Is that what you find?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say too that the course, the interactions are delivered online, but also so much of the course for people happens in the actions they take in between the calls, and those very much happen in their real worlds. They're going out, meeting people, they're going out, running small experiments, they're going out, trying different things, and that's a really important part of the program as well.
Thanks. Any other questions from anyone? I've got one if no one's got one. Right, well, can I have my question, Richard? Is that all right? So
you can, of course.
So my question is, because I mentioned we do something similar with our Be Bold in Your Career program. And when I'm talking, mostly I'm talking to organizations who might be wanting to provide career support for their people. So they're not out there looking for career change themselves, but they're in the organization. And I hear everyone saying, oh, well, it's got to be bite size. We can't do anything if it's not bite size, and, LinkedIn Learning. And it sort of concerns me, because you can do bite size. An individual component could be bite size, and you can break it down into small things, can't you? As I'm sure you probably do. But the whole thing of 8 weeks, so I'm just wondering how you tackle that with the mindset of some people about what people need to develop themselves in this modern era of the way learning and development is going in particular. So I don't know if anyone else has encountered, but it's becoming quite the TikTok generation, they won't do that, so just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, no, totally. So coming back to what everyone said as well, time is a challenge for our end audience. My philosophy is that our attention spans aren't necessarily becoming shorter, but there is much more competition as to what's going to engage us. So, for example, many of us will sit down in front of a series on Netflix and consume it all, and that's those are big chunks of time, right? And so there's something there that's engaging us. And so I think what we're constantly asking ourselves as a team is, what is it that we can do that's going to maximize that engagement in an era where we just have to raise our standards for the level of engagement we provide. So that's an angle that I would come at this from.
Yeah, interesting. I noticed we've got a great question in the chat from Nadia. So she's saying, Richard, are the actions you've mentioned set by the client or by the Careershifter Launch Pad?
Yeah, so Nadia, they are set by us and they are tailored by them. So we will give, so for example, I talked about missions. So there's a whole set of missions throughout the course. I'm not going to go into the specifics of them because that belongs in the course primarily. But the missions involve people going out, meeting new people, having new experiences, stepping into new environments, running small experiments. And all of those things, we give them the parameters, but they then tailor those actions to what they're most interested in. And so every single mission that happens during the course, with all the different participants that are taking part, are unique. They're different, but they all follow a set of guidelines that we provide.
Great, thanks, Richard. So you're creating the framework for them to act and some suggestions.
Yes.
And interpret the way they want. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, John, do you want to come in on anything or to share some of your insight, having been involved in this?
Well, there's a question for me from Laura, and I'll try and come to that in a minute, but a reflection for you, Richard, which is that you talked about the way we've formed a community that's encourages action, but there's also kind of accountability as well, isn't there? And as a part of this kind of action learning model, and there's something there about helping people sort of travel together and check in with each other. Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So again, what we've seen is when our clients travel together on this 8-week journey, there's momentum that happens. Why? Because there are several mechanisms. So we use an online community. We also use a group coaching course. People are hearing about other people's actions. They're getting inspired. They're feeling more accountable to taking the actions and reporting back on them themselves. And so there's this, again, virtuous circle of accountability that leads to greater momentum, that leads to greater confidence, that leads to greater activity, that in turn repeats all of those things. And so that's what we hope happens. For the most part, does happen. Now there are some people that get overwhelmed, and we then try and do our best to help them get back on track. And again, coming back to what Siobhan said, there are some people that just, even though they set out with best intentions, they can't necessarily make that time, and then they start falling behind and they feel in a difficult situation. And for the most part, most people will join that stream, that momentum, and get so much more done in 8 weeks than they would have done just by themselves. John, does that speak to what you were after?
Absolutely, I think so. Yeah, I just think it's sometimes one of the things we forget about in terms of what action learning is all about. There's something about mutual support, but it's also what I've also seen is sort of people just keeping each other accountable and sort of taking the next step and giving a big cheer, when things work for people. So, and I'll answer Laura's question, because Laura's asked me what do I enjoy most about working with the groups, and I do have the privilege of working at some stage with each of the Launchpad groups. What I've learned most is what it feels like to be constantly reshaping material and refocusing and trying to get it better and better so that we are as good as Netflix. To take Richard's example, you really have to finding different ways. And I've learned so much about finding different ways of engaging people in an online program. And the biggest surprise really is how adventurous people are and the absolute joy that they express when things work for them, when they get a breakthrough or just an amazing conversation. And that's what we hear a lot. And it's something really important, and it takes us into the territory that Richard talked about, really, which is about this being sort of life enhancing, not just about career movement.
Wendy Hirsch, would you like to introduce yourself, Wendy?
Hello, and Richard, I work mostly on adults in employment, like Rosemary does, so not as a career coach, but as a broader employment consultant and researcher. And we had a great conversation, and you've already answered some of our questions, and I love the box set analogy, I should say. But one of the things that I'd be interested to know is how you help people get started with that exploration when you use the term fields of interest, when they have no idea about one or more things they might be interested in. So they know about themselves quite a bit, but they can't express that in kinds of work or where to look to get the conversations. And I know from recent research in higher education that a lot of students are in that position. They have no idea. So, and the careers advisors all assume you come with one or more ideas. So what about the completely clueless, Richard? How do you help them start on their adventure?
Yeah, so I think most of our audience would fit themselves into that category. And completely clueless, by the way, can mean in our world that people feel they have no ideas, or equally they feel like they've got too many and they're just like, I don't know where to start. And so the way that we tackle this is through bringing in approaches from innovation. So I talked about before that we believe career change where people are stuck is really about innovation. And so coming back to this diagram that I shared earlier, you'll see behind a faint line behind here, there's a shape to this journey. And some of you may recognize this from they called the double diamond approach, which is a well-established approach to tackling innovation. And essentially what we do is follow that. And we follow this in the discovering phase where through action, we get people to step repeatedly outside of their reality bubble. They collect inspiration, ideas, things that move them, touch them, resonate with them, all in one place. And they start to essentially collect the metaphorical jigsaw puzzle pieces for the things that really interest them in the world. And alongside that action, learning, discovery, there's also more effective discovering work that they're doing. And then we help them bring all those different jigsaw puzzle pieces together into not into a job title, not into a specific line of work, but into thematic areas of interest in the focusing phase that then allow them to then go and run some experiments in those areas in a productive way to get to insights about what's going to be exciting and viable for them in terms of career paths. So that discovering process is really where we help people start to generate those ideas through action and through applying the principles of innovation, which is really about getting new inputs to lead to new outputs.
Brilliant, Richard.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yes, and I suppose I didn't spot it first time round, or I didn't really fully spot it, that you're prepared to spend half the programme on that very early part of discovery. And I don't think normal practice in career guidance maybe allows for that much, wobbling around right at the beginning.
Yeah. You're getting a few frowns on faces saying that. So
well, maybe it doesn't. But just given the mechanics, Rosemary, of the short periods of time that a professional career advisor in your world of one-to-one career coaching, people will often spend more hours. But in a university, people are going to get 1 45-minute shot. Some universities will offer a lot more, but not all.
Yeah.
So you've got to get pretty quickly to what are a few things you might want to talk about. Some universities and indeed some employers will give people far more airtime. But often if you can't say anything about what interests you, you don't get so much help, I think.
Well, we're just conscious of time, everyone. So sorry, that was really interesting. We could almost have a longer discussion about this, couldn't we? How we apply some of the principles of Richard's program into, with younger people and in, educational settings or HE settings. It would be quite interesting to do that, actually. But we are running out of time. And so firstly, Richard and John, inviting Richard to share his experiences with the fellows and the members of NICEC has been fantastic. Really, really generous of you, Richard, to share some of your thinking out loud and your process and your success with this impressive program. So thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully it's created some connections. I'm going to invite Claire just to tell us a little bit about future events that we've got coming with NICEC, because Claire's in charge of the programme of events. So Claire, just final word to you then, really.
Thanks. Just reiterating a thank you to Richard and John, and to you, Rosemary, for chairing it so consummately. That's always hard at this stage of the day. 2 events we've got following up, the 23rd of January. So is that 2 months today? It is. And that will be Kathy Brown and Helen Cooper looking at helping people in mid-career. So hopefully it will pick up some of the themes from today. And then Wendy, who's here, and a colleague, Alison Carter from Institute for Employment Studies, evaluating career coaching. So looking at some of the ways that we actually measure the impact. So again, that will be picking up some of the themes we've touched on. And of course, we all have to put a date in our diary, don't we, Jill, for the conference on the 2nd and 3rd of July. In theory, all of the events are on the NICEC website. Sometimes you have to click on a particular aspect to actually get them revealed to you, don't you, Jill? We've discovered today. But as this one drops off, the next event will be there, and then you can go through and look at future events. So thanks very much for this evening, and please join us for any or all of the forthcoming events.
You've probably seen, Richard, all the great comments in the chat for you and John, so well done, everyone, and enjoy your evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.